Hey everybody, welcome to the Counterpoise Podcast. My name is Malik Foster. I'm one of your co-hosts for the Counterpoise Podcast today. I'm
Hey,
joined by my co-host.
hey everybody. I am another co-host. I am Samantha Adams. Right before we let our third co-host introduce himself, I want to give a shout out to our fourth co-host, um, Shantae Tidbo. She's not able to be with us today. But go ahead.
And yes, I am the third co-host, Everett Stevenson, and today I we have a really good topic for you. An interesting topic, I should say. We're looking at the black male vote, and in particular, in reference to the Georgia governor's race, and how it could have a major impact on who the Democratic nominee would be for that state. So we're going to go ahead and take a look into different aspects as to the significance of the black male vote, some of the things that we think that black male voters look for prior to casting their votes and a few other factors. So, yeah, we want to go ahead and pop that off here momentarily. In reference, one of the things that got us to looking at this issue was a news clip from, I think it was MSNBC, in which there were a few news anchors discussing the Georgia Democratic nominee, in particular on the reference how if black male voters come out and vote for one nominee, which I believe is Stacey Abrams, that would ensure that she would win the Democratic nomination. So it got into a conversation in which people discussed maybe what some of the reasons in which black male voters in the state of Georgia in particular may not have or have a little hesitancy in voting on this race. But we believe that this is an issue that could be discussed in majority and looking at all races and all votes in reasons in which, black male voter turnout may not be as high as it could be in other elections. So anybody want to jump in and give us some of the thoughts about the clips that they saw?
Yeah, let me give a little quick correction. Stacey Abrams. Abrams is her last name. And so real quick, just a little bit more background I want to add is that Stacey Abrams ran for governor back in 2018 against Governor Brian Kemp. And at the time, Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State. For those of y'all that don't know, Secretary of State, we did a podcast on this way back, right? We mentioned this, we gave mention to this. I think it was back when Donald Trump was running for re-election when he was going up against Joe Biden. But just to go ahead and give further context, Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State. The job of the Secretary of State is to manage the elections, right? Manage the votes, the whole bit. He refused to step down as Secretary of State while running for office, which creates a huge conflict of interest, in my opinion, and also too, just prior to that, he also disenfranchised over it was like a few 100,000 people. It was over 100,000, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that number, but it was a significant number of people. Most of them were Black, saying that their signatures didn't match. People's signatures changed over time, right? You don't write your name the same way today as you did when you were 10, So I think that, or even when you were 18, if you're not 18, right? So, it created a big thing. And Governor Kemp ended up winning that election, right? So now here we are today. Stacey Abrams is running again. She lost by a very slim margin of votes. It was like 50,000 people, right? And so herein lies the issue, right? When you give the breakdown of voters, right? Because pollsters always do that. They always give breakdowns of voters. They give the breakdown of statistics based on nationality, race, gender, all that stuff. Black women typically trend with Democrats, and men overall typically vote more conservative. And that's one of the things that this MSNBC news clip discussed. It talked about Black men specifically. So men overall typically vote more conservative. And the problem is that, you know, and I'm not saying it's a problem, like I think it's a problem. I'm just saying that the problem in the news clip is that what they were saying was that, number one, you have Black men who won't vote for Black women because she's a woman, right? And so there's a level of misogyny there. But then also, two, you have Black men that vote for people that don't really have their best interests at heart, which is where the argument comes in, right? Because me and Malik have had this discussion, and we'll probably get into it a little bit more today, and it's very spirited, right? So let me just give y'all the little disclaimer, right? And also, two, there's a whole group of Black men that won't vote, period. And that creates a whole nother issue. So I just wanted to go ahead and add that to the background of part of today's discussion. Malik?
Yeah, so I guess just to add, I guess, a little bit more context. So of what she's saying. So back then, in 2018, this all stems from Stacey Abrams saying that she could have won and she could still win this election in 2022, this midterms, if she's able to get the Black male vote. Because right now they have her projected at 48%, and Brian Kemp's at 50%. So Black men can make up that 2%. And they're trying to figure out what happened with back when President Obama was running, specifically here in the state of Georgia, 120,000 Black men were voting Democrat. And those 120,000 voters, they either changed political parties, went Republican, or they abstaining from voting. So they just checked out of the political voting process, period. So that's one of the reasons why it's brought up, because Stacey Abrams is saying, hey, I only lost by 55,000 votes, 50,000 plus votes. And if Black men vote at the same rate as Black women do democratically, that's an additional 120,000 votes. And I would have cleared that 55,000 threshold, and she would have been declared the next governor of Georgia. So that's one of the reasons why they're bringing it up. And that's the reason why we're here today, to talk about the Black male voting. We're specifically focusing on Georgia, but this is a trend throughout the country, because what they've noticed through the YouTube clip, the MSNBC clip, we could post a link in our description as well, that Black men, they've trending upwards towards more and more Republican. Almost about 1/5 of Black men are starting to vote Republican. Is up to like 19%, about 1/5. So that's a good portion of Black voters switching sides, not to mention some of the Black people who are just abstaining from the process, just particularly Black men. But just a side note, Black women are also trending a lot slower, but still trending upwards towards voting Republican as well. But today we're just focusing on Black men. So I just wanted to give that background of it. Anybody want to comment, have any comments on that particular trending?
I mean, you know, my biggest thing is the impact that has on Black people as a whole, right? And I think that goes to part of the discussion in that clip, right? And guys, just so y'all know, you know, we're not playing the clip. We're going to put the link in the bio, so y'all can go ahead and watch it and come up with your own ideas and opinions about it. But we're just going to discuss it today. The thing about that clip is that when you talk, when they're talking about Black men specifically becoming more, voting more conservatively, it goes to what are our issues, what are our interests, and how do we attain those goals overall as Black people, right? And there's a portion of the clip where the news anchor, I can't remember her name, she, says something to the effect of, certain type of people that typically follow Kevin Samuels, another guy, somebody else was pretty conservative and traditional in their views.
Yeah, Tariq Nasheed.
Yeah, Tariq Nasheed, to kind of get in line with some Black women voters. The reason why I believe she said that is because, there are a lot. Let me stop and back up. I think that the problem is that we go against our own views. We go against our own views, no matter if you vote Democrat or Republican. The reason why I say that is because Democrats have a history of not really pushing the Black agenda forward. Republicans have a history of limiting the Black agenda. And so she makes a comment saying that when you follow the people that have that tend to follow these guys, it doesn't mean that you are a stereotype or anything like that. Nobody's knocking you for following them. I think it's really just the ideology that she's coming up with is when you're not being heard, why do you go vote with people who are trying to go against your interests? And me personally, I think we just need to and Roland Wilson was also on there, and he had made a comment of, we need to get people in place that are gonna push the Black agenda forward. I agree with that, because at the end of the day, don't go for people that aren't gonna listen to you, and don't go for people that are gonna oppress you in your views. Go for somebody that's gonna try to advocate for you and push your views forward. That's my personal opinion. And when she made the comment, I mean, I know that comment was a little offensive. I think it was more about what she said as opposed to, how she said what she said rather than what she was actually, her intent behind it. That was a little offensive. But at the same time, she had other people on there, right? And one of the other guys, he got on there and he talked a lot about how some Black men view female politicians. They just don't believe that female politicians have the ability to push the Black agenda forward. They don't have faith in them because, some Black men are misogynistic. I mean, you're going to come across that no matter what race you're talking about, right? So I don't think it's something that goes across the board.
Hey, Sam, I just wanted to jump in here and say, like, to argue the other side, like even Roland Martin was saying, hey, there's this Black men as a group being sexist. Yeah, there's some incidents of it, but I don't think they're more sexist than any other male group because of what Roland Martin was saying. Like even in the national race, when there was two men, Black men were still leaning towards the more conservative way. It's trending towards that way. So it's not just because that Stacey Abrams is a Black, as a woman, it's because Black men or men in general are more conservative. And if her policies aren't aligned to what the Black men want or on their agenda, then she's not going to get those votes. And I think that's more of the majority. Of course, there is some sexism in place throughout this country where some men believe that women shouldn't be in positions of power or have any type of influence on decision making. But I think that the main thing is the fact that the issues aren't being addressed, and that can be evidenced by showing when it's two males, they lean conservative, right? Or even when there's other females, they still lean conservative.
Right.
Well, that's what I was kind of going towards. I think not necessarily the conservative or liberal views of the voters. I think the agenda in particular. I feel like a lot of times, as a Black male, we might not necessarily hear politicians that have platforms that will seek to develop plans for that may be favorable in our defense. So I think when we hear these things and when we hear certain plans that come out, it's not necessarily one that's geared towards the advancement of Black males in particular, like just solely Black males. One example of this we can look towards is, I believe, we talked about this one time in the past, that I don't know if it was the state of Georgia or if it was the state of California. I believe it was Georgia, actually, which had a plan where they were going to offer single mothers, I believe, a certain amount of income, just to kind of track how their spending will go if they had an additional, I think it might have been $1,000 a week or $1,000 a month or something like that.
$1,500 a month, and it was in Georgia.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So we oftentimes see a lot of times that politicians generally favor, females within the policies. We've seen this happen also when we look at, government assistance, going back to like the Nixon times, and how there was assistance provided solely for women who necessarily did not have a male in their home. And so generally, I think these type of policies and the way that politicians have necessarily addressed these issues have always kind of been one that were more favorable towards women. And I'm not necessarily knocking that, but I do think that if order for you to necessarily want to bring someone out to vote, that they should see something that's going to be beneficial towards them. And I think that's why we may see sometimes a lot of more females voting towards things than we do towards males going out to rock the vote, as they say. So
I agree with you, E. Like basically, there are programs in place for Black women, economic policies, and things of that nature. There's some things for men, but they're not marketed, right? They're not marketing to men, letting them know this is what we're trying to do to address your issues. But with Black females, it's always, the heavy marketing, and that's due to the fact that Black women are the number one support group for the Democratic Party, but guess who's number two? Black men. So it's like you just can't ignore your second most loyal voting bloc completely, and then they can make a difference in elections based off the numbers, right? And you're trying to win these elections, and it's like you're trying to find these votes, and that's where your votes are, is your base. And if you're ignoring a good section of your base and just saying whatever, and you're just trying to tell like the number one supporters of your base to just tell those other groups to get in line, that's not going to work. And we've seen that not working. So, the Democratic Party is really going to have to, rethink their strategy, just like the Republicans. Like they mentioned in the clip that the Republicans even, they put a little bit funding towards Black men to try to sway them. And it's like, okay, what's the Democratic Party trying to do, right? Are they putting money specifically for Black men to try to persuade them? Any marketing, any policies specifically for Black men? So that's something I think that the Democratic Party is going to have to do if they want to possibly win these races coming up.
One of the things that I think Roland also said they need to start earlier, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. They need to start earlier as far as the Democrats are concerned. I think that when you're talking about trying to recruit people for your team, like you said, Malik, I agree. You cannot ignore your base, but I think as a whole, Black people have been ignored, despite the fact that Black women may be, the primarily vote Democrat, and the second highest group is Black men. But if you ignore them, like for example, Biden's been in office for how long now? And at his inaugural speech, he said pretty much to the Black folks, "I'm not going to forget about you." Ain't nothing happening. You know what I'm saying? We still don't have a George Floyd bill. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some things have been done, like the anti-lynching bill finally got passed, which is important. But what's the George Floyd bill? Rather than, reforming criminal justice, you're giving more money to police rather than trying to fix the problem. You're throwing money at the problem as opposed to trying to fix it. That's not going to ever work. right? That's what they always do. And that's the reason why we are still in the same position that we are as it relates to the relationship between Black people and the police, right? Education is a mess, right? The economy is jacked up. These are all things that Black people care about, Black men specifically, right? Those are some of the biggest, issues that Black men specifically care about. In the clip, they also talk about Stacey Abrams, right? And the agenda that she runs on. The agenda that she runs on actually addresses a lot of Black male issues. And so it's like, here it is. Now you finally have a Democratic candidate that in her plan addresses a lot of Black male issues, but then you still have men that don't want to vote for her because she's a woman. And that's what I was getting at before, Malik, with that. And so it's like, you want to go ahead and vote for somebody that, you know, is going to drive your issues. And do we know whether or not she's actually going to do them? We don't. But is the likelihood there higher? Yes. Why? Because she's a Black person, right? Because those things matter to Black women as well, but those are primarily Black male issues, right? Things that go to the Black male agenda. Because she's also going to drive home things for Black women, which also include, you know, abortion, right? Gun control, things like that. So, you know, I think that it's important to recognize that your candidate may not come in the form that you want them to come in, but they're going to come. And so you have to be open enough to be willing to go ahead and vote for that candidate, especially too when we go so long with either having just these two parties. Listen, we all know that there are multiple parties, right? But everybody votes one of two ways. And the problem is, I think that we need to start voting a different way. Not necessarily independent or green or libertarian or whatever. I honestly think that there needs to be a party that specifically helps Black people. If not, you know, we have the Black Caucus, but they don't do enough. And it's not to say they don't do anything, because they absolutely do, right? But we need to have a heavier seat at the table, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term, because we're constantly, we hold this country up. We hold it up. We've held it up forever, right? Since we got here. Right, we built it and we hold it up, but we're at the bottom all the time. And it's time for us to stop being at the bottom all the time. And we have to find ways to make that happen, you know? And so that's the reason why I said, like, you know, when you're looking at the Georgia gubernatorial race, now, as opposed to what happened before, but now you have a candidate that's ready to do the things that'll help, you know, but Black men are still like, nah. You know, whether it be because she's a woman, whether it be because they don't have enough information, whatever the reason is. And they very well may just as opposed to voting for Kemp, they may just not vote. And that's problematic, because why? We end up still sitting in the same boat. And I know that a lot of people feel as though nothing will ever change, no matter if you vote or not. But Georgia has, especially Atlanta, we have so many Black people here. You know what I'm saying? Like, the city of Atlanta is like 78% Black, you know, and that's just the city. That's not, you know, in the surrounding areas. So I think it's important to really recognize what we got going on and that our agenda matters. Now, for nothing, Georgia turned blue in the presidential election, you know, and they touch on that. And that's the reason why the president is under investigation now for tampering with the,
But black people make an impact nationally and in the state of Georgia, right? They can make, because you know, Biden was really losing until they started to get in some of those mail-in ballots from those cities, primarily Black cities in the Midwest and in the South, right? So that's something that really changed and turned the races there for Joe Biden. But specifically in the state of Georgia, Stacey Abrams saying, hey, I can win this if everything stays the same, but Black men come out and vote for me. But it's like, hey, you got to do the marketing. You have to figure out how to convince Black men who are known voters to either go back to being Democrat, or hey, they used to vote, but they stopped voting, to come on out and vote for you. That's the Democratic Party's job. And that's not the fault of Black men. It's their job to persuade you as your former constituent to come back home. And that's what the Democratic Party's failing to do, in my opinion. Just shaming them, saying, hey, get in line. Why aren't you like Black women? No, they're a separate voting bloc.
I mean, but that was just the opinion of that one woman, though.
Yeah. I know. She made that statement, and it's like, no, that's not correct. It's like just getting in line is not enough. The Democratic Party needs to do the work for both Black men and Black women. But since we're focusing on Black men, you got to do the work. You can't just ignore them and say, hey, September, what's going on? Why aren't you guys voting? Just like Roland said, like, hey, you got to build up some stuff for them and start as soon as the elections go, because you see the trending is going in the opposite direction, and you can't afford to lose 1/5 of your second most loyal voting bloc and still try to win these elections when, you know, a lot more people are trending more conservative because they don't like the way things are going in this country.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that that's the case, and to the point that we was making earlier about, you know, the sexism or sexist. Look, I truly don't believe that, you know, if male voters, in particular Black male voters, saw some type of platform or saw some type of initiative that did have something that benefited them, that they would be opposed to coming out and voting, regardless of who the candidate is per se. I think it's more so of an issue of, you know, again, we don't necessarily feel like you're speaking to us in some of these cases, or that you have anything or in your plan or in your agenda that necessarily benefits us. And so in that route, you know, it's like some people may feel like, who cares? Whereas others feel like, you know, hey, I'm gonna come out and vote for my party, but you know, that's that.
Well, that who cares thing is like, you know, it's not going to change anything. You know what I mean? And that a lot of that comes from, that's the reason why I say, you know, consider having a whole nother party, somebody that can push forward that agenda. And the reason why I say that is because if you vote one way or another and it doesn't seem to matter, right? Like, of course, people are not going to vote. You know, they're not. And so you got to give them a reason to get out there and go vote. And, you know, you have to put money behind it, especially when you're talking about Black men, because you have far more Black men not voting than you do Black women. And so I think as far as, you know, sexism is concerned, I think it's there, period. I don't think that it's any more than any other nationality. I just think it's there, right? That's just like when you're talking about church. Some men don't like going to a church ran by, where a woman is the pastor. It's just a very traditional, old, archaic view that probably should never be in somebody's head, but it is. You see what I'm saying? Some people just have a problem with women in power. They just do. And you can't do anything about that. Is that true for everybody? No, right? And I'm not saying that in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but it does exist. And we can't ignore it, right? And so you still have to try to find a way to get people out to vote, because voting is important. And no matter how much we can sit here and say, oh yeah, it's not going to change anything, it's not going to change anything as long as people don't go out and vote, because you're going to continue to perpetuate the same cycle. If you keep thinking the same cycle, it's like manifestation, right? Like if I keep thinking something bad is going to happen, eventually something bad is going to happen. If I keep thinking something good is going to happen, eventually something good is going to happen. So we have to really work towards that, continue to keep ourselves educated. Like these are some of the solutions, you know what I'm saying? Continue to find ways to keep ourselves educated as it relates to these things. Keep finding, vote, get candidates in there. You go be a candidate, something, you know what I'm saying? But we got to push the agenda forward. You see what I'm saying? And we can't do that by just sitting at home. And we can't do that by doing things that are counterintuitive. We have to find innovative ways to make things happen. That's the thing about Black folks. One of the things, and this just came to me right now, one of the issues is that we keep finding ourselves in the same cycle because things are always the same. Black people are innovative, creative people, right? And so being that we're innovative and creative, we have to start looking for innovative and creative ways to get the things that we need. Even if that is in election, even if that is with voting, even whatever it is, we have to try to find new ways to go about doing that.
Absolutely.
Right. Some of my last thoughts on it is, yeah, there is, sexism that plays a role, but what can we do about sexism, right? If a person's going to be sexist and they're not going to change their mind, but if they do have issues that, you can possibly solve, and if they're willing to vote for you, if you present those issues to them that, hey, this is my plan for it, you definitely want to be able to, address that and make the changes you need to make. And obviously you want to voice their concerns and say, hey, we hear your concerns, listen to their concerns, and we're going to address your issues. So you don't want to neglect your second most loyal base, or your voting block, by just saying, hey, forget you guys until election time comes around. Then it's like, hey, what's going on? Why is there this big old gap? And how can we make that up? And it's like, it's too late. So by then it's like, man, you're fighting an uphill battle. So you definitely want to have that awareness of what the issues are of the male voting bloc, Black male voting bloc, and try to address those issues before it's time for re-election, before midterms, before the presidential elections, stuff like that, and address their issues. That's the main thing that I see that the Democratic Party needs to do. And then they'll actually start getting some more wins. Because the whole, Trump's racist, all that stuff, you can't say like, okay, every candidate on the opposite side is always racist. You can't keep playing that card, because if you're not doing anything and you're like, basically, when it comes to racist situations or oppressive situations, and you're not fixing them, what makes you different from the other side, right? So that's another issue that the Democratic Party has to address. Like, they have their own racism and their own benign neglect policy of Black people. They just say stuff but not do stuff, right? And they still expect to win. Those days are over. They're going to keep taking losses until they address Black people's issues. That's what I foresee. So that's all I wanted to say about like my final thoughts and some solutions.
Yeah, with me personally, I think basically I agree. I think with this issue, there needs to be more of a dedicated understanding within the plan to address Black male voters, especially if this is a demographic of voters that you feel as though would be needed in order for you to advance your position, as far as locking in, your theme locking in your position in receiving either a nomination or votes. And I think that it shouldn't just be deemed that you need to go out and vote solely for, a person's race or sex alone. I think that candidate needs to prove to the voters that they do have something for them, that they do have plans to develop some type of advancement or some type of I don't know, like I said, plan to help that demographic become a little bit better suited for whatever situation that they're in. That's pretty much my views on it, and I think that that's on the behalf of the candidate to do so.
Absolutely. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our motivational minute and our Black book and Black business of the month. First, our Black book of the month. Our Black book of the month is The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. You guys, please make sure you go check out that book. It really will help you unlearn a lot of things that we need to unlearn in try to find ways to learn things that we need to know. It's a really great book, and I highly, highly recommend it. That's why it's our Black Book of the Month. A Black Business of the Month is The New Black Wall Street. So if you ever find yourselves out here in Atlanta in the Stonecrest area, please make sure you check it out. It's a place where, you know, lots of entrepreneurs go in and they sell their products. They have a bunch of different things in there. It's Black owned, it's Black run, and all of the businesses inside are Black businesses. So please go make sure you check them out. That is called The New Black Wall Street, and it's out here in Georgia in the Stonecrest area. That's the Atlanta area, but it's Stonecrest, okay? It's its own little city. And lastly, our motivational minute. So I have on this t-shirt that I got from my office. And I know you guys can't read the quote. I'm going to read it to you. It's a quote written by Malcolm X, okay? And so the quote says, "I am for truth, no matter who tells it. I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I'm a human being, first and foremost. And as such, I am for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole." And the reason why I chose that quote is because, you know, today we discussed, you know, our focus point was Black men in voting, right? But at the end of the day, the goal is to help improve people as a whole, right? It's not necessarily just to improve the Black man or, you know, improve the Black woman or improve the Black people, even though we're all for it, right? But it's really to just improve ourselves as a whole, no matter what your nationality is, and find a humane way to do it with good intention and humility. And so, you know, that's the reason why I chose it. And I just hope that it encourages you all today to not just be truthful and seek justice and honor and all of those good things and the things that you do, but also to remember to be kind to each other. We share this planet, and we have to be able to work together in order to find peace within it. And I know that's hard, but, you know, we still got to do it. So you guys want to make sure you're good to one another. And with that, we are closing out. You will see our socials posted up here at the end. So make sure you tap in, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, all that good stuff. And also, too, you can check us out every Wednesday around 8:30 on Instagram for our What's Up Wednesday segment. And you can check these out. We post these every Saturday at 1:30 around then. So again, we love y'all. Thank you for tapping in. Fellas, y'all got anything to say?
No, I'll see you guys next week. Appreciate y'all tapping in.
Yeah, guys, thank you for everything.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we will see y'all later.
Peace.
Peace out.